The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Windsor Castle as Catherine, Princess of Wales, carefully fastened the delicate sapphire necklace around her neck. The jewelry had been a wedding gift from Queen Elizabeth herself. A treasured piece that had belonged to Princess Diana, Kate had worn it only on the most special occasions, and today marked the 10th anniversary of her marriage to Prince William. She admired her reflection in the ornate mirror, touching the precious stones gently. The necklace held such deep meaning for her family, connecting her to William's beloved mother in a way that felt both honoring and comforting. Today's garden party would bring together members of the royal family, government officials, and distinguished guests from around the world. Down the hallway, Queen Camilla was preparing for the same event in her private chambers. Her lady-in-waiting had laid out several jewelry options, but Camilla's eyes kept returning to a particular diamond necklace that sparkled brilliantly in its velvet case. She had been eyeing this piece for months. Knowing it would complement her outfit perfectly for such an important gathering, Royal Guard James Morrison had been assigned to security detail for the family quarters that morning. A veteran of 15 years in the Royal Protection Unit, he took pride in his discretion and attention to detail. Nothing escaped his notice, and he had developed an ability to observe without being observed himself. His position required him to be present but invisible, a skill he had mastered over his years of service. As Kate made her way toward the main reception area, she passed through the blue drawing room where other family members were gathering. The necklace caught the light beautifully, drawing admiring glances from the staff members who were making final preparations for the garden party. She felt confident and elegant, ready to fulfill her royal duties with grace. Camilla emerged from her chambers, wearing the diamond necklace she had selected. But her expression changed the moment she spotted Kate's sapphire piece. Her face tightened almost imperceptibly, though most people would never have noticed such a subtle shift. Guard Morrison, however, was trained to observe every detail, and he caught the flash of something dark that crossed the Queen's features. The garden party began with its usual formalities. Kate moved through the crowd with natural ease, engaging guests in conversation and making everyone feel welcome. Her warmth and genuine interest in people had always been one of her greatest strengths as a member of the royal family. The sapphire necklace seemed to enhance her natural radiance, drawing compliments from several distinguished guests who recognized its significance. Camilla maintained her royal composure throughout the event, but Guard Morrison noticed how her gaze kept returning to Kate's necklace. There was an intensity in her stare that seemed unusual, even for someone who appreciated fine jewelry. He positioned himself strategically to maintain visual contact with both women while staying within proper protocol boundaries. During the afternoon tea service, Kate stepped away briefly to check on the catering arrangements. She had always been hands-on in ensuring that royal events ran smoothly, a quality that endeared her to the household staff. As she spoke with the head butler about the evening's dinner preparations, she absent-mindedly reached up to adjust her necklace, ensuring it lay properly against her dress. It was then that disaster struck. The delicate clasp, weakened perhaps by age or the day's activities, suddenly gave way. Kate felt the necklace slip from her neck and heard the soft sound of precious metal and stones hitting the marble floor. Her heart sank as she looked down to see the treasured piece scattered across the ground, the chain broken and several sapphires rolling in different directions. Guard Morrison witnessed the entire incident from his position near the corridor entrance. He immediately moved to assist, but protocol required him to wait for Kate's request for help before intervening directly. She knelt carefully, gathering the larger pieces while trying to locate the scattered stones. Her distress was evident, though she tried to maintain her composure in front of the staff. Camilla appeared in the doorway moments later, having noticed Kate's absence from the garden party. When she saw the broken necklace, her reaction was swift and seemingly sympathetic. She immediately knelt beside Kate, offering to help search for the missing pieces. Her concern appeared genuine to anyone watching, and she spoke soft words of comfort about how the necklace could surely be repaired. But Guard Morrison was watching more carefully than most. He noticed how Camilla's hand moved with practiced efficiency as she helped gather the scattered sapphires. Her movement seemed almost too smooth, too knowing, as if she had experience with handling precious stones under pressure. Most telling of all was the brief moment when Camilla's fingers closed around one, particularly large sapphire, and seemed to hesitate before placing it with the other recovered pieces. The head butler arrived with a velvet cloth to carefully collect all the fragments they could find. Kate was visibly upset about the damage to such a meaningful piece, but she thanked everyone for their help and insisted that the incident shouldn't disrupt the garden party. Her grace under pressure impressed the staff members who witnessed the scene, reinforcing their respect for her character. As they prepared to return to the guests, Camilla placed a comforting hand on Kate's shoulder and assured her that the royal jewelers would be able to restore the necklace to its original beauty. Her words were kind and supportive, exactly what one would expect from a caring family member in such a situation. She even offered to contact the jewelers personally to ensure the repair received priority attention. Guard Morrison remained at his post, but his mind was working through what he had observed. Something about the entire sequence of events felt wrong to him, though he couldn't quite identify why. His years of experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and those instincts were telling him that there was more to this incident than a simple jewelry malfunction. The garden party continued without further incident, but the guard found himself paying closer attention to both women as the afternoon progressed. Kate had recovered her composure and continued to charm the guests despite her earlier distress. Camilla appeared to be in particularly good spirits, engaging in animated conversations and laughing frequently with the distinguished visitors. As the day wound down and preparations began for the evening's activities, Guard Morrison made a mental note to himself. He would be watching more carefully in the days to come, trusting that his instincts would eventually reveal the truth behind what he had witnessed in that marble corridor. 3 days after the garden party incident, Guard Morrison found himself assigned to evening security rounds throughout the private family quarters. The castle felt different at night, with long shadows cast by ancient tapestries and the soft echo of footsteps on stone floors. He had been thinking constantly about what he had witnessed, unable to shake the feeling that something important had escaped his notice. Kate had sent the broken necklace to Garrard, the royal jewelers, for assessment and repair. The preliminary report had been concerning. Not only was the main chain damaged, but 2 of the larger sapphires appeared to be missing entirely. The jewelers had searched through all the fragments multiple times, but the stones simply weren't there. Kate was devastated by the news, as those particular sapphires held special significance within the piece's history. During his rounds that evening, Morrison noticed light coming from beneath the door of Queen Camilla's private study. This was unusual, as she typically retired to her chambers much earlier. He paused in the corridor, listening carefully for any sounds that might indicate a security concern. What he heard instead were the soft voices of Camilla and her personal secretary, Margaret Thornfield, engaged in what sounded like an intense conversation. Professional curiosity got the better of him, and Morrison positioned himself where he could observe without being seen. Through the partially open door, he watched as Camilla sat at her antique desk with a jeweler's loupe pressed to her eye, examining something small that caught the lamplight. Margaret stood nearby, holding what appeared to be a leather portfolio and speaking in hushed tones about discreet arrangements and trusted contacts. The guard's training kicked in as he noted every detail he could observe. Camilla seemed to be inspecting gemstones, though from his position he couldn't determine exactly what type or size. Her movements were careful and practiced, suggesting she had significant experience with jewelry evaluation. This struck him as odd, since most members of the royal family left such technical assessments to professional jewelers. Margaret handed Camilla several documents from the portfolio, and they discussed what sounded like authentication procedures and provenance records. The secretary mentioned something about matching clarity ratings and identical cut specifications, terminology that seemed unusually technical for a casual conversation. Morrison memorized as much of the dialogue as he could, knowing that seemingly innocent details might prove significant later. The following morning brought disturbing news from the royal jewelers. Their detailed examination had revealed that Kate's necklace had been damaged by what appeared to be deliberate tampering rather than natural wear. The clasp mechanism showed tool marks consistent with careful weakening, designed to fail under normal stress. Moreover, their records indicated that 2 sapphires matching the missing stones had been offered for private sale through discreet channels within the past 48 hours. Kate was stunned by this revelation. The idea that someone had deliberately sabotaged her necklace seemed impossible to believe, especially given that it had happened during a family gathering. She requested a private meeting with palace security to discuss the implications and determine what steps should be taken to investigate further. Morrison found himself called into that security meeting, where he was asked to provide his account of the garden party incident. He described everything he had witnessed in detail, including Camilla's reaction to seeing the necklace, her assistance in gathering the scattered pieces, and the subtle behaviors that had concerned him. His superiors listened carefully, taking notes and asking pointed questions about timing and positioning. The head of palace security, Sir Richard Whitmore, had served the royal family for over 20 years. He understood the delicate nature of investigating potential misconduct within the family itself. Any formal accusations would require overwhelming evidence, and even then would need to be handled with extraordinary discretion to protect the monarchy's reputation. After the meeting, Morrison was assigned to expanded surveillance duties with specific focus on monitoring jewelry-related activities throughout the royal quarters. This assignment was presented as routine security enhancement, but everyone involved understood its true purpose. The guard would need to gather concrete evidence while maintaining absolute secrecy about the investigation. That evening, Camilla hosted a small dinner party for several wealthy American collectors who were visiting London. The guest list included individuals known for their interest in acquiring rare gemstones and historical jewelry pieces. Morrison observed the gathering from his security position, noting how the conversation frequently turned to discussions of provenance, authentication, and the private market for exceptional pieces. One guest in particular, a dealer from New York named Harrison Webb, seemed especially interested in Camilla's expertise regarding royal jewelry collections. He asked detailed questions about specific pieces and their historical significance, while she provided remarkably knowledgeable answers about technical aspects that most people wouldn't know. Their exchange felt more like a professional consultation than casual dinner conversation. After the guests departed, Morrison continued his surveillance and noticed Margaret returning to Camilla's study with a small package that she handled with exceptional care. The secretary placed it in a secure safe that had been recently installed behind a portrait of King Charles III. The guard made note of the safe's location and the specific precautions taken to conceal its existence. Kate, meanwhile, was struggling with the emotional impact of learning that someone had deliberately destroyed her treasured necklace. The piece represented her connection to Princess Diana and her place within the royal family's history. The violation felt deeply personal, as if someone had attacked not just her jewelry, but her very identity as William's wife and future queen. She confided in William about her suspicions. Though she was careful not to make direct accusations without proof, he was equally disturbed by the implications and promised to support whatever investigation was necessary. However, both of them understood that accusing Camilla would require irrefutable evidence and careful consideration of the potential consequences for the family. Morrison spent the following days documenting patterns in Camilla's behavior, particularly her interactions with visitors and her access to various jewelry collections throughout the castle. He noticed that she had been spending unusual amounts of time in areas where historical pieces were stored, often accompanied by Margaret and sometimes by individuals who weren't regular palace staff. The guard also began researching the backgrounds of recent visitors to the royal quarters, focusing on those with connections to the jewelry trade or private collecting communities. His investigation revealed a network of relationships between Camilla's social circle and individuals known for facilitating discreet transactions involving high-value gemstones. As the evidence slowly accumulated, Morrison realized he was uncovering something far more complex than a single incident of jewelry theft. The scope of what he was discovering suggested a systematic operation that had likely been ongoing for some time, with Kate's necklace representing just the latest target in a much larger scheme. The question now was how to proceed with such explosive information while protecting both the investigation and the innocent members of the royal family who might be affected by the revelations to come. 2 weeks into his investigation, Guard Morrison discovered something that changed everything. While conducting routine security checks in the castle's archive rooms, he found evidence of systematic catalog discrepancies dating back nearly 3 years. Several pieces from the royal jewelry collection had been replaced with high-quality replicas, while the originals had mysteriously disappeared from inventory records. The discovery happened almost by accident. Morrison had been looking for historical security footage when he noticed that Margaret Thornfield had been making frequent visits to the archive storage areas, always during overnight hours when minimal staff were present. Her access credentials allowed her to enter these restricted areas, but her frequent visits seemed unusual for someone whose official duties involved correspondence and scheduling. Morrison decided to examine the storage logs more carefully. What he found was a pattern of items being removed for cleaning and assessment that never returned to their original locations. Instead, replacement pieces appeared in the inventory, with subtle differences that would only be noticed by experts conducting detailed examinations. The paperwork for these substitutions bore Margaret's signature and Camilla's approval stamps. The guard realized he needed help to understand the technical aspects of what he was uncovering. He discreetly contacted Thomas Ashford, a retired royal jeweler who had served the family for 30 years before leaving to start his own authentication business. Ashford agreed to meet privately to discuss Morrison's concerns, though the guard was careful not to reveal the full scope of his suspicions initially. During their confidential meeting, Ashford explained how sophisticated jewelry forgeries had become increasingly common in recent years. Criminal organizations now had access to technology that could create replicas nearly indistinguishable from originals without expert examination. The retired jeweler also mentioned that he had been contacted several times recently by private collectors seeking authentication of pieces that bore striking similarities to items from the royal collection. Armed with this new understanding, Morrison returned to the castle archives with fresh perspective. He began photographing catalog entries and comparing them with the actual items currently in storage. What he discovered was shocking. Nearly 20% of the collection showed signs of having been replaced with replicas, representing millions of pounds worth of missing jewelry and gemstones. Meanwhile, Kate was dealing with ongoing frustration about her necklace repair. The jewelers had informed her that creating replacement sapphires would require several more weeks, as they needed to source stones that matched the specific characteristics of the original gems. She was beginning to suspect that the missing stones might never be recovered, which added to her emotional distress about the entire situation. Camilla, appearing to sympathize with Kate's disappointment, offered to help locate replacement stones through her network of jewelry contacts. She claimed to have connections with dealers who specialized in historical gems and might be able to find suitable matches more quickly than traditional channels. Kate appreciated the gesture, though something about Camilla's enthusiasm for the project felt slightly uncomfortable. Morrison observed several meetings between Camilla and individuals he now recognized as significant figures in the international gem trade. These gatherings were always arranged discreetly, often in locations outside the castle where surveillance would be more difficult. The guard began coordinating with Palace Security's intelligence unit to track these contacts and understand their business relationships. The investigation revealed that one of Camilla's frequent visitors was Elena Kozlov, a Russian businesswoman, known for facilitating high-value transactions between private collectors. Kozlov had previously been investigated by international law enforcement for suspected involvement in laundering stolen cultural artifacts, though no charges had ever been filed. Her presence in Camilla's social circle raised serious red flags for the security team. During one particularly revealing surveillance operation, Morrison witnessed a meeting between Camilla, Margaret, and Harrison Webb. the American collector from the earlier dinner party. They gathered in a private room at an exclusive London hotel, where they examined what appeared to be several pieces of jewelry laid out on a velvet cloth. The conversation was too distant for Morrison to hear clearly, but their body language suggested serious business negotiations. Webb was observed photographing the jewelry pieces from multiple angles, while Margaret took detailed notes and Camilla provided what looked like authentication documents. At one point, Webb handed Camilla an envelope that she quickly tucked into her handbag without examining its contents. The entire exchange had the appearance of a completed transaction between experienced professionals. Kate, unaware of these developments, was growing increasingly concerned about the security of royal jewelry generally. She had begun to notice that other pieces seemed slightly different than she remembered, though she couldn't pinpoint exactly what had changed. Her attention to detail, developed through years of public appearances wearing significant jewelry, was picking up subtle variations that others might miss. She decided to conduct her own informal inventory of pieces she wore regularly, comparing them with photographs from recent public events. What she discovered alarmed her. Several items showed differences in stone placement, setting details, or overall proportions that suggested they might not be the same pieces she had worn in the past. Morrison's investigation was reaching a critical point where he needed to involve higher authorities, but he also understood the explosive nature of what he had uncovered. Accusing the Queen Consort of orchestrating jewelry theft and replacement would require absolute certainty and overwhelming evidence to avoid destroying innocent lives and damaging the monarchy itself. Sir Richard Whitmore made the difficult decision to expand the investigation by bringing in MI5 agents with expertise in high-value theft and international smuggling operations. These specialists would work under deep cover to trace the suspected stolen jewelry and identify the full network of individuals involved in the operation. The MI5 team discovered that several pieces matching royal collection descriptions had surfaced in private auctions and exclusive sales in New York, Geneva, and Hong Kong over the past 2 years. The timing of these sales coincided with the periods when items had been removed from castle storage for alleged cleaning and assessment. Building this timeline would be crucial for establishing the pattern of criminal activity. Camilla, meanwhile, seemed to sense that increased scrutiny was being directed toward her activities. She became more cautious about her meetings and communications, often using Margaret as an intermediary for sensitive conversations. However, her confidence in the sophistication of her operation led her to continue with plans that would ultimately provide investigators with the evidence they needed. The turning point came when Morrison witnessed Camilla examining Kate's repaired necklace, which had been returned from Gerard with replacement sapphires. Using a jeweler's loupe, she studied the new stones with an intensity that seemed far beyond casual interest. Her expression suggested disappointment, as if the replacements didn't meet some specific criteria she had in mind. That evening, Morrison overheard a phone conversation between Camilla and an unidentified contact, discussing the limitations of the replacement stones and expressing regret that the original pieces had been processed too quickly. The implications of this conversation were clear to the guard. She was lamenting that Kate's original sapphires had already been sold before she could examine them more carefully for potential future use. The investigation was now focused on gathering enough evidence to confront Camilla directly while ensuring that any legal proceedings would be airtight. The stakes couldn't be higher, as the reputation of the entire royal family hung in the balance of how this explosive situation would be resolved. The breakthrough in Morrison's investigation came from an unexpected source. Elena Kozlov, the Russian businesswoman, had been under surveillance by international law enforcement for completely separate financial crimes. During a raid on her London offices, investigators discovered detailed records of transactions involving jewelry pieces that matched descriptions from the royal collection. Among these documents were photographs and certificates that clearly showed items bearing the distinctive markings of pieces housed at Windsor Castle. Sir Richard Whitmore received this information through official channels and immediately understood its significance for their ongoing investigation. The external evidence provided crucial corroboration for what Morrison had been documenting through his surveillance activities. More importantly, it gave them leverage to approach the situation with confidence in their findings. The decision was made to confront Camilla privately before any information became public. King Charles would need to be informed immediately, as the situation could potentially threaten the stability of his reign and the monarchy's reputation. Sir Richard prepared a comprehensive briefing that outlined the evidence while suggesting possible approaches for resolution that might minimize public scandal. Morrison was present when Sir Richard met with King Charles in the private study at Buckingham Palace. The monarch's reaction to the briefing was a mixture of shock, disappointment, and deep concern about the implications for his family and the institution he had recently inherited. Charles had always prided himself on maintaining the highest standards of conduct, and learning about such serious misconduct within his own household was devastating. The king's first concern was determining the full scope of the operation and ensuring that no other family members had been unknowingly involved. He authorized an immediate but discreet expansion of the investigation to examine all jewelry-related activities over the past 5 years. The goal was to understand exactly how much had been stolen and to identify all parties who might have participated in the criminal enterprise. Kate and William were briefed about the investigation's findings in a separate meeting. Kate's initial reaction was relief that her suspicions about the necklace incident had been validated, followed quickly by anger about being targeted in such a personal way. William was furious about the betrayal of family trust and concerned about how the revelation might affect his father and the monarchy's reputation. The couple agreed to cooperate fully with the investigation while maintaining absolute secrecy until the matter could be resolved. Kate specifically requested that efforts be made to recover her original sapphires if possible, as their emotional significance made them irreplaceable regardless of their monetary value. Margaret Thornfield became the key to unraveling the complete operation. When confronted with the evidence against her, she initially denied involvement but quickly broke down when presented with documentation of her own activities. She revealed that the scheme had begun small, with Camilla asking her to arrange loans of certain pieces to wealthy acquaintances for special events. According to Margaret's confession, these loans gradually evolved into permanent replacements as Camilla realized the replicas were sophisticated enough to avoid detection. She had been promised significant financial compensation for her cooperation and had been led to believe that the removed jewelry was being used for official diplomatic purposes rather than personal profit. Margaret's detailed testimony revealed that Camilla had been systematically targeting pieces that were rarely displayed publicly, ensuring that the substitutions would be unlikely to be discovered through normal handling. She had also been careful to select items that weren't regularly photographed for official documentation, making before and after comparisons more difficult. The scope of the operation was staggering. Over 3 years, more than 60 pieces had been removed and replaced, with the originals sold through a network of international dealers who specialized in serving wealthy private collectors. The total value of stolen items exceeded £8 million, making it one of the largest jewelry thefts in British history. Camilla's motivation appeared to be primarily financial, though investigators also uncovered evidence that she had kept several pieces for her personal use rather than selling them. These items were found hidden in a private safe deposit box registered under an assumed name, along with documentation of overseas bank accounts that had received proceeds from the sales. The international nature of the operation COMPL-ICATD efforts to recover stolen items. Many pieces had been sold to collectors in countries with different laws regarding cultural patrimony and stolen goods. Legal experts advised that recovering everything might take years and would require cooperation from law enforcement agencies around the world. King Charles faced an agonizing decision about how to handle the situation. Pursuing criminal charges would mean exposing the scandal publicly and potentially damaging the monarchy's reputation during the early years of his reign. However, failing to prosecute such serious crimes would violate his principles and could be seen as indicating that royal family members were above the law. After consulting with legal advisors, government officials, and senior members of the royal household, Charles decided on a course of action that would attempt to balance justice with institutional protection. Camilla would face private consequences and be required to cooperate in recovering stolen items, while the matter would be handled through discreet legal channels that might avoid extensive public exposure. The confrontation with Camilla took place in King Charles's private study, with only Sir Richard Whitmore and the King's personal secretary present as witnesses. When presented with the comprehensive evidence against her, Camilla initially attempted to deny involvement, then tried to minimize her role by claiming she had been misled by advisors about the legality of her actions. Charles's response was swift and decisive. He informed Camilla that she had violated the trust placed in her as queen consort and had committed serious crimes that could not be ignored. She would be required to resign from all official duties immediately and cooperate fully in recovering stolen property and identifying all parties involved in the operation. Camilla's reaction to the confrontation revealed the calculating nature that had enabled her criminal activities. Rather than showing genuine remorse, she attempted to negotiate terms that would minimize her personal consequences and protect her financial interests. She tried to argue that many of the pieces had been underappreciated in the royal collection and that selling them had actually increased their cultural value by placing them with collectors who would properly showcase them. This response convinced Charles that his initial instincts about appropriate consequences had been correct. Camilla's inability to show genuine remorse or accept responsibility for her actions demonstrated that she posed a continuing risk to the royal family and the monarchy's reputation. The king's decision was final. Camilla would be stripped of her royal titles and removed from the line of succession. She would face criminal charges through discreet legal proceedings designed to minimize public attention while ensuring that justice was served. The stolen items would be tracked down and recovered through international legal cooperation. Regardless of the time and expense required, Morrison's role in uncovering the operation was quietly recognized through a private commendation and promotion within the Royal Protection Service. His careful observation and professional instincts had prevented what could have become an even more damaging scandal if the theft ring had continued operating undetected for additional years. The aftermath of Camilla's exposure created a crisis unlike anything the royal family had faced in modern times. Within hours of her confrontation with King Charles, palace staff began implementing carefully planned protocols designed to manage the transition while maintaining absolute secrecy about the true reasons for her sudden departure from public life. The official announcement to the media was deliberately vague, citing health concerns that would require Queen Camilla to step back from her royal duties indefinitely. This explanation provided cover for her immediate removal from public events, while legal proceedings moved forward through discreet channels. The palace communications team had prepared detailed responses to anticipated questions, ensuring that all staff members would provide consistent information to any inquiries. Kate found herself in the unusual position of feeling vindicated about her suspicions while simultaneously grieving for the family turmoil that the revelation had caused. Her relationship with Charles had always been respectful and warm, and she could see how deeply the betrayal had wounded him personally. The king had trusted Camilla completely, and learning about her criminal activities had shattered his faith in his own judgment about people. William struggled with anger about how his wife had been targeted and manipulated by someone they had welcomed as family. The deliberate sabotage of Kate's necklace felt like a particularly cruel violation, designed to cause emotional distress while facilitating theft. He worried about how the scandal might affect their children and the future stability of the monarchy they would someday inherit. Behind the scenes, international law enforcement agencies were working to trace the stolen jewelry through the network of dealers and collectors who had purchased the pieces. This process required careful coordination between countries with different legal systems and varying approaches to cultural property rights. Some collectors claimed they had purchased items in good faith and demanded compensation before agreeing to return stolen pieces. The investigation revealed that Camilla's operation had been far more sophisticated than initially understood. She had been working with professional criminals who specialized in creating replica jewelry so accurate that even experienced appraisers might not detect the substitutions without detailed technical analysis. These forgeries had been crafted using advanced techniques that matched the original craftsmanship in every visible detail. Margaret Thornfield's cooperation proved invaluable in understanding the operation's structure and identifying additional stolen items. Her detailed records had documented every transaction, including photographs, authentication certificates, and financial transfers. This meticulous documentation, originally intended to protect the criminal enterprise, became the key evidence needed to pursue recovery through international courts. One of the most disturbing discoveries was that Camilla had been targeting pieces with particular historical significance, apparently understanding that their cultural value made them especially attractive to certain collectors. Several items connected to Queen Victoria and Princess Diana had been prioritized for theft, suggesting that Camilla had deliberately chosen pieces that would cause maximum emotional damage to family members who treasured these connections to their heritage. The psychological evaluation ordered by the court system revealed troubling aspects of Camilla's personality that had been carefully hidden during her public life. Expert analysis suggested that she possessed traits associated with narcissistic personality disorder, including an inflated sense of entitlement, lack of empathy for others, and willingness to exploit personal relationships for material gain. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, a forensic psychiatrist with extensive experience evaluating white-collar criminals, concluded that Camilla had likely been planning and executing similar schemes throughout her adult life. The sophistication of the jewelry operation suggested years of experience with fraud and manipulation, indicating that her crimes against the royal family might represent just the most recent chapter in a long criminal career. King Charles struggled with questions about whether he should have recognized warning signs of Camilla's true character before their marriage. Royal advisors and security personnel assured him that sophisticated criminals often possessed exceptional skills at deception and manipulation, making them difficult to detect even for experienced observers. However, the king continued to blame himself for bringing such a dangerous person into the heart of the royal family. The process of examining and authenticating the entire royal jewelry collection revealed additional disturbing discoveries. Several pieces had been damaged during the replacement process, with original settings altered to accommodate slightly different replica stones. The cost of proper restoration would be substantial, and some historical pieces might never be fully returned to their original condition. Kate's original sapphires were eventually traced to a private collector in Switzerland, who had purchased them through Elena Kozlov's network. The collector initially refused to return the stones, claiming he had paid fair market value and demanding substantial compensation. Legal pressure from both British and Swiss authorities eventually convinced him to cooperate, though the recovery process took several months to complete. When Kate's necklace was finally restored with its original sapphires, she experienced a complex mixture of joy and sadness. The physical return of the piece couldn't undo the violation she had experienced, or restore the sense of family trust that had been damaged. However, wearing the necklace again felt like reclaiming something important that connected her to Princess Diana's memory and her own identity within the royal family. Public speculation about Camilla's disappearance from royal events grew increasingly intense as weeks passed without official explanation beyond vague health concerns. Royal correspondents noted the absence of any hospital visits or medical updates that would normally accompany a serious illness affecting a senior royal. The palace's refusal to provide additional details only fueled more aggressive media investigation. Several journalists began investigating Camilla's background more thoroughly than had been done before her marriage to Charles. These inquiries uncovered questionable financial transactions and relationship patterns that suggested the royal family scandal might be just one part of a larger criminal history. However, legal restrictions prevented media outlets from publishing their findings without risking serious libel consequences. The international recovery effort achieved mixed results. About 60% of the stolen items were successfully traced and returned. Though many required extensive legal proceedings and diplomatic pressure, some pieces had already been resold multiple times, making their recovery nearly impossible without extraordinary legal cooperation from foreign governments. Charles made the difficult decision to personally contact the families of previous owners whose jewelry had been stolen, apologizing for the violation of trust and offering to assist with recovery efforts where possible. These conversations were emotionally challenging for the king, as they forced him to confront the personal consequences of his failed judgment about Camilla's character. The financial investigation revealed that Camilla had accumulated several million pounds in overseas accounts using proceeds from the jewelry sales. These funds were frozen pending legal resolution, though recovering the money required complex international legal proceedings that might continue for years. The hidden wealth demonstrated the systematic nature of her criminal activities and her long-term planning for financial independence through illegal means. As legal proceedings moved forward through discreet channels, the royal family began the difficult process of rebuilding trust and establishing new security protocols to prevent similar incidents in the future. The scandal had exposed vulnerabilities in their systems that required fundamental changes to how valuable collections were managed and monitored. 6 months after the initial discovery, the legal resolution of Camilla's case set important precedents for how such matters would be handled in the future. The Crown Prosecution Service worked with the Attorney General to develop charges that reflected the serious nature of the crimes while allowing proceedings to remain largely outside public view. Camilla ultimately pleaded guilty to multiple counts of theft, fraud, and conspiracy in exchange for a sentence that avoided a lengthy public trial. The sentence included substantial prison time, complete restitution for stolen items, and forfeiture of all assets connected to the criminal enterprise. More significantly for the royal family, Camilla agreed to a lifetime prohibition on any contact with members of the royal household and permanent exile from the United Kingdom. These conditions ensured that she could never again pose a threat to the monarchy's security or reputation. Morrison found himself permanently assigned to an enhanced security role focused on protecting the